Welcome to this video where I go through the main characters from Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, so obviously the first person I'm going to speak about is Dr. Henry Jekyll. He is, I guess, the protagonist um, of the novel, alongside Hyde, but of course, we know they are ostensibly the same person. Jekyll takes that, I feel, role of protagonist because Hyde sits in the shadows, which is fairly natural given his kind of evil nature. Jekyll is very respected. He represents sort of, I guess, the civil side of human nature. He's one of our traditional Victorian gentlemen. But as well as this, he is a representation, a manifestation, I guess, of the Victorian obsession with science. Okay, because being a doctor, being someone involved in experiments, he sort of exemplifies this new interest in the developing world of scientific discovery. Ultimately, he succumbs to, what do we call it? The base or the sort of latent human desires. In this case, a kind of desire for animalistic violence. And therefore, he acts as a warning, possibly. A warning about the dangers of kind of messing with the natural order. I'd be remiss speaking about Jekyll if I didn't then speak about Hyde. Hyde is our antagonist. And again, it's a bit of a weird one because, he is a version of Jekyll. But he's the antagonist. He's meant to obviously be very frightening. He's somewhat deformed. He's very kind of creepy in a way, isn't he? In the depictions. Hyde represents, I guess, the kind of animalistic, unhampered, unhindered side of humanity. He has this incredible capacity for violence. And in many ways, he is a reaction to Darwin's theory of evolution. And this idea is, if we have, descended over generations through evolution, what still remains of the animal? Now, Utterson is primarily the main narrator, so he is the conduit, or we could also call him the vehicle, through which the novel arrives. He, I guess, kind of investigates. He represents in some ways this kind of natural Victorian curiosity about the world. He's a little bit naive, I think, as well. And that's probably because what he's dealing with is so much bigger than anything that he possibly could have comprehended prior to being involved in this situation. So he's a little bit naive. He's a little bit sort of not reluctant, but like he struggles to fully comprehend what he's dealing with, right? Because he's a lawyer, we're meant to trust him because he's like, he's a professional, he's well respected, etc., etc. Obviously, he's the person that Paul comes to break into the laboratory. rationality, sort of evidence-based discovery. That's really what Utterson sort of represents. But also this kind of Victorian lack of, the Victorians were very much like, here's myself in public and here's myself in private. And the reason why he doesn't, initially at least, pry too deeply into Jekyll's situation is because he kind of respects Jekyll's privacy. Now we're getting into, I guess, some of the more minor characters. Lanyon, I mean, what does Lanyon exist for? The main event that obviously he's involved in is the fact that he dies soon after seeing Jekyll turn into Hyde. But I guess this is meant to emphasize just how shocking, how sort of transgressive, and how frightening Jekyll's actions are. If someone even like Lanyon could be so overwhelmed, then what hope is there for the rest of us? Paul is obviously Jekyll's butler, and again, he's largely just a plot device to keep the action moving. In that he goes to Utterson and they break into the laboratory, and he's obviously one of the first people to see that he sees Hyde's body. And Enfield is another kind of respected Victorian gentleman. He's the one who sees this initial murder, and again, he is essentially kind of a dramatic device to introduce us to Hyde's sort of evil nature, right? Those are the main characters that you need to know.